Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth in the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case. My first case. Aurelia location. My office room, 14. 5. 21. So 900 a.m. I was sweating, not due to the heat. I was shivering, not because of the cold. It was all fear, nervousness. I saw myself in the mirror. My chocolatey brown skin glowed. My face seemed like a scared child. A woman in her 30s was standing at my door. Her face was pale, and her eyes were brimming. I felt Jack's presence in my room, so I tried to act normal. He touched my shoulders. Are you sure you can do this? I took a deep breath. Yes, I can. But actually, I wasn't confident. I let the woman inside my room. She said, my husband, Victor, wasn't picking up his phone. I checked his lab, and he was lying over there with blood all around. Please help me. I was noting everything in my diary. I looked up at her face again. So what's your good name? She whispered, Galena. I stared at her. So, ma'am, is your husband alive? Or location? Chem-Tech Lab, 14. 5. 2021. 09:45 a.m. He was there, lying lifeless on the floor in a pool of blood. We wore our rubber gloves. The lab was such a mess. Whoever did that was clever enough to leave no clue. Our team examined the body and sent it for post-mortem reports. Jack stared at me. I got closer to him. I got this note. He had it clutched in his hands. He patted me. Okay, continue. It wasn't a note. Rather, it was a page from some kid's counting book. There were few numbers circled in it, and most of the words he had written on the page were either blotted due to sweat or soaked in blood. There was something scribbled, and next to it was written in a terrible handwriting, "Feel." That did ring a bell. Jack peeped into the paper. What is it? I replied, I guess it is feel, an archaic word for faithful, or maybe Fey is iron, Al is aluminum. Galena interrupted. No, it's Felix Allen. I got curious. Who's that? She glared outside the window. He's Victor's best friend, colleague, 10 years younger to him. Below that, there was blood, and the only thing I could read in between, that was Nikum. And Veer, Jack asked. Aura, what is Nikum? I took my eyes off the paper. Probably it's a surname. One of my classmates had it. I moved to the surveillance room. Galena followed me. This room is incomplete. There's nothing to check here, lady. Victor hasn't installed the cameras yet. After sealing the area, we met the watchman. Sir, you were supposed to be on duty last night. He nodded his head. Yes, ma'am. I walked closer to him. So what seemed unusual last night? He replied, Nothing of that sort, ma'am. As usual, Victor, Sir, and Felix had a terrible fight. And yes, he was the only one who came here last night. He tried to avoid eye contact with me. Galena came up. Victor and Felix fighting with each other doesn't surprise me. And she went away. Location: my office room, 14/5/2021, 3:00 p.m. I slowly asked, Jack, how was I doing yesterday? He chuckled. Like how beginners do. The post-mortem report arrived. Jack glanced at me. Aura, what does the report say? I responded, Nothing unusual. Cause of death is hemorrhage. Time of death is 02:47 a.m. He sat beside me. What did you derive from the bizarre note? I took a sip of my coffee. I've given the note to Elena to find out the order of numbers he circled. Through the past ink detector, Elena entered the room with her usual radiant smile. Here you go, Aura. I and Jack peeped into it. The numbers he circled were 66, 57, 7, 8, 74, 68. I made funky faces. What is this? Probably this guy went nuts before he died. Jack stared at me. The only one who's going nuts is you. Listen, beginner. See, there are 10 digits. Probably this is a phone number. Unable to control my curiosity, I dialed the number to check. It said, This is Felix. I'm busy. Leave a voice message. I felt so embarrassed, even though it was my first case. Location: Felix's house, 15/5/2021, 8 a.m. I knocked at the door. I was nervous, excited, and don't know what else. The door opened. A man, probably in his 50s, stood there. He wore short floral trousers and a white, crumpled shirt. May I know who's this? I beamed. I'm Aura. Aurelia. Don't you remember me, Uncle? I'm Felix's college friend. He smiled back. Yes, I do. Look, girl, you've grown up. I chuckled. Felix was in his room. And what surprised me was the room consisted of both Akara Nikom and Dylan Ower. I felt like it was turning from an investigation to a reunion party. Felix was too in shock. A positive shock. He hugged me. Oh my God, this day is too good. A few minutes ago, I was telling these guys how upset I am for you weren't here, and he asked me to take a seat. I'll get you something to eat. By the way, Dylan and Akara got married. You know, they're working with us. I reminded myself I had some work over there. I went inside Felix's kitchen. Phil, would you mind if I stay here with you tonight? I need to talk something in private. He beamed. Yeah, sure. He got too excited. Back in his room, I looked all around. Akara said, So how's life going for you? I chuckled. Oh, it's crazy. What about you guys? What are you guys working on? Akara replied, This project is supposed to be confidential. I joined this group just last week, as soon as I got married to Dylan. He is the one who introduced this to me. I owe him a lot. Dylan chuckled. Don't mention it, girl. Everybody in the room had wide smiles. Location: Felix's house. 15/5/2021. 10:00 a.m. The day was almost over. Dylan and Akara had left. I felt butterflies in my stomach. Felix was so happy. I was afraid what I had in stock for him would blow away his sunshine like a smile. But on the other hand, what if he turns out to be a venomous snake? What if he was the culprit? All such thoughts were passing in my mind. He sat close to me. Hey, I too have a lot to talk with you. Where should we start from? I frowned. Why are you whispering? He looked embarrassed. I don't know. And he pulled himself a little bit farther from me. We stared at each other for a second, and then he started. You used to say you wanted to become a detective. Did that happen? I sighed. Coming to that point, I am a detective now, and I'm extremely sorry to tell you that Hector is dead. He chuckled. Come on. Your pranks are seriously outdated. I was gonna say that you've changed, but you're still the same. I showed him my ID. Phil, I'm serious. Your friend died day before yesterday. Tears started to drip from his eyes. Are you serious? I nodded my head. A minute later, I asked him, how frequently did you and Victor fight? He softly said, I need a break. And he went off to the balcony and wandered. He came back. I repeated the question. He sighed. Every time we met, we used to fight a bit. Sometimes for fun, and the other times seriously. But the last time wasn't my fault. He was the one who slashed his knife at me. He pulled his shirt to show his blood-stained bandage on his stomach. When I started bleeding, I left the room shouting at him. I stared at him. So, you mean to say you did nothing when he slashed the knife at you? He went on weeping. I had stopped talking to him for a week, and then that day I went to sort out our issue, and he did this to me. I bit my lips. The watchman heard you guys fighting. He said you were the only one who met him last night. His eyes reflected fear. I don't remember seeing any watchmen over there. He shoved his head into his hands and went on weeping. He slowly rubbed his right hand on his old cut mark on his left wrist. I asked him, I know it hurts a lot, but what was the fight about? He was still rubbing the cut. I don't know. He was hiding something about the project, and I almost did everything in the project, but he never paid me on time. Or maybe he never paid me. I was struck in a terrible financial situation. He went on weeping. I thought maybe this played as a motive to kill him. Location: Chemtech Lab, 16/5/2021, 09:30 a.m. Back at the lab, I met the watchman. Hey, good morning. What else do you know about Felix's and Victor's fight? He waited for a second and said, Well, you know, lady, they fight for the silliest thing in the world to the most serious thing in the world. Felix would frequently threaten to quit the project if he wasn't paid. He never understood that Victor was too in a financial issue. He wasn't able to pay his daughter's fees. I asked, Anything else? He thought for a moment again and said, Few days before they fought, Felix stole the money Victor had for paying Irina's fees. He said it was an emergency. Victor was very upset because they suspended his daughter from school for a month. I nodded my head. So was the fight verbal or physical? He didn't waste a second. Physical? Galina gave me the key to the lab. Hello? I asked her. If you don't mind, shall I ask you something? She nodded her head. I started. What kind of relationship did Felix and Victor have? She shifted her hair falling on her face. Victor used to treat him like his own brother, but suddenly things started to fall apart. I then asked her, What about Dylan and Akara? Galina replied, They're cool. They've joined recently. Victor told that if the project was compatible with these guys, then he would no longer need Felix. I roamed around the lab and started feeling thirsty. So I walked myself to a nearby shop, leaving Jack in the lab. I asked for juice. He passed it to me. So, ma'am, are you the one investigating Viktor Antonov's murder case? I nodded my head. Yes, I am the one. He came near to me. Don't trust the watchman over there, I whispered. Why? He said, Madam, that fool is a booze head. He drinks every night and goes to the backyard of the lab and lies down there. I was like, okay. What? I quietly came back and whispered into Jack's ears. Now I was very confused about what to trust and what not to. I checked the lab for more clues. Galina asked us to join her for lunch. Location: Victor's home, 16/5/2021, 11:30 a.m. As Galina was preparing lunch, I roamed around the house. I met his 14-year-old Irina over there. She was in her room, sad. I went to her. Hey, do you want to paint? She said, no. I knew what she was going through. I sat beside her. I know it's hard. She turned towards me. I was thrown out of the school. Gradually, Felix stopped taking my tuitions, and now Dad is gone. She wept. I told her, "We'll find out who did that to your dad, and we'll put him in jail." I asked her, "What kind of tutor was Felix?" She blushed. "Who? Felix? He was great. He used to take my math tuitions. I don't know. The last few days when he took my tuitions, his eyes were red, and he was pretty distracted. And in the middle of nowhere, my dad pulled him to his room and smacked him badly. I never knew why. Galina came to the room, pulling Irina, and whispered, 'Don't talk about that idiot in our home.' There was a strong motive for Felix to murder Victor. He faced a series of depression during his college day, and when he came out of that, he came out violent. I found an unposted letter over there. It was from Victor to Felix. I tried to read it, but due to Galina's presence, I put it into my pocket. Location: Felix's house, 16/5/2021, 3:45 p.m. His father asked me to wait in Felix's room while he had gone somewhere out. I found another letter in his home. This was probably 2 months old. I took both of the letters and read them. It was written in 50% English and 50% Russian. The Russian part was written in English fonts. There was nothing new, while the whole letter said that he was sorry for what he did. There was nothing he could do to help Felix. But the last 2 lines struck me. It said, "Never nikom, mene ochen zal." Don't trust anyone. I'm really sorry. I tried to match it with the note clutched in his hand. It was never Akra Nikom or Dylan Ower, with only half of the spelling visible. But I felt, if he had mentioned it in this note, too, did that mean Victor was gonna take revenge for his murder with that note? But that would be really melodramatic, to write sorry, and all while you die. I looked at the letter even closely for clues. That's when I found out. The scribbling before feel meant ask. Ask, feel. I smiled. I said to myself, Aura, he probably wanted the finder of his body to ask Felix about something. Or maybe he wanted us to question him. I could hear Felix's voice and footsteps. I put the letters in my right pocket and the note in my left pocket. I already had a note, too, where I had arranged those numbers in order. He was still in the same condition. He smiled, but not from his heart. I tried not to waste time. Feel? What are your comments on this note? He slightly glanced at it. That's my phone number, but the commas are crazy. In between them, I sighed. What would it mean with the commas? Suppose you find this number somewhere not related to you. He pulled that note from me and stared at it. He constantly mumbled to himself. After 5 minutes, he said, if I went by the element's atomic number, 66, 57, 7, 8, 74, 68, would mean dysprosium, lanthanum, nitrogen, oxygen, tungsten and erbium. I stared at him. And if we go by its symbols, then Di-La-N-O-W-R. His eyes were filled with horror. Jack called me. Hey, Ora, Achara is murdered. She just died a few minutes ago in my arms and told me. I interrupted. I know the rest. Just come to Felix's house and give him protection. I'll catch him. We'll find out the why after that. The plunderer's bank robbery and waltzing have a lot in common. Both have defined rhythms, and they're better with a partner. After waiting my turn, like an everyday customer, I handed my note and a paper sack to the blonde girl behind the counter while pulling back my sport coat to show her the butt of my pistol. The note read, "This is a robbery. Remain calm so no one gets hurt. Fill the sack from your drawer. Have a nice day." When she scanned my note, her eyes bulged and flicked from side to side. Her frightened blue peepers filled with disbelief as she stared at me to see if this was a prank. I smiled like a friend. "Please fill it up." With trembling fingers, she stuffed bills into the sack as if she'd win a prize for the fullest bag. The gorilla behind me noticed something wrong. Maybe the sweat-gouging channels through the quivering blonde's rouge tipped him off. He grunted and grabbed me in a bear hug, pinning my arms. My marine training kicked in and I stomped the arch of his foot with the sharp leather heel of my polished Oxfords. He winced and loosened his grip. This gave me enough slack to reach behind and twist his balls. He yipped like an injured puppy and let go, slowly sinking to the floor. The bank patrons turned to stare at the commotion. Unsure what was happening, I reached through the teller's wicket and yanked the half-filled sack of money from the blonde's jittery hands. As my assailant rolled on the floor, grabbing his crotch, one of the suits in the back reached for a phone. Time to go. I strolled out of the bank before anyone attempted to jump me. Outside the bank, I wanted to run, but nothing attracts attention more than a man running from a bank with a bag in his hand. The alarm clanged, and I turned towards the bank like the other pedestrians, plastering a puzzled look on my face. A siren wailed in the distance. Sweat beaded my forehead, and I lengthened my strides short of a power walk. When I reached the corner, white exhaust flowed from the red Edsel coupe, and its big V8 growled, ready to whisk me to safety. I jumped in the passenger seat, and Marge drove away at 30 miles per hour. 2 police cruisers screamed past us in the other lane. Now, we'd have to ditch this flashy car in case anyone noticed it fleeing the scene. Marge and I have been robbing banks since I got out of the Marines in '53. My posting to Korea separated us for 3 agonizing years. And when I got back to the States, we promised each other we'd never be apart again. Although we talked about it, we never got married. We both felt that a piece of government parchment would not make us love each other any more than we did. When our cash ran low, we'd find a suitable bank in a small town, make an unauthorized withdrawal, and live comfortably on the proceeds for a few months. As long as we didn't take too much or go to the well too often, the local cops forgot us, and the FBI had enough problems with organized crime to worry about a small-town bank robbery. We never hit the same town twice. Our life between jobs was quiet and measured, spending the winter in Florida, soaking up the sun like other tourists. We danced every Saturday night and fished the local lakes. Marge loved the fall colors, so we spent September in New England before turning south for the winter. I don't remember the name of the town in Minnesota when we ran low on cash. While Marge gassed up the car, I got us a table in the Moosehead Diner over the blue plate special of corned beef and hash. I decided I wanted to go fishing. Margie, I've been thinking. It would be a shame to be in northern Minnesota and not go walleye fishing. How about we rent a cabin after this job and go fishing for the weekend? Marge placed her napkin on the table and pursed her lips. Okay, Harry, but all the cabins are probably rented. I reached for her hand. This is the end of the season, and we'll find a cabin somewhere, just for the weekend. Then we'll head for Vermont. She squeezed my hand and ran her thumb over my knuckles. We'll need some bait. I hadn't thought that far ahead. We'll stop at a bait shop and pick up some minnows. Or, if you'd rather, you can watch me fish. She removed her cat's eyeglasses with the fake rhinestones and leaned over the table. Not on your life, Buster. You fish. I fish. And I'll catch bigger fish. Just you watch me. I finished my coffee, left a $10 bill on the table, and wiped the crumbs off my tie. I'm going to the little boy's room, and then to work. As I walked across the street to the Imperial Bank, Marge parked the car around the corner. We took the North Road out of town towards Canada and doubled back south on a series of gravel concession roads. Navigation was Marge's job. When we hit the interstate, we turned east towards New England. The cops must have figured it out, or got lucky. They'd had 10 years to learn out our pattern. When we turned onto the interstate, 2 police cruisers, nose to nose, blocked our path to freedom. Blue and red lights flashed, and cops leaned across the hoods, pointing shotguns at us. 2 more cruisers pulled out of a side road and blocked our retreat. Marge slowed as we approached the roadblock and parked on the shoulder. A cop with a bullhorn yelled, "Get out of the car and lay on the ground." Marge turned off the ignition and gripped the wheel with hands at 10 and 2 while staring out the windshield. "Goodbye, Harry." I wiped a tear from my eye. "Goodbye, Marge." I drew my pistol and shot her through the ear. Blood spattered the windshield and side window as she slumped on the driver's door. I put the pistol in my mouth and pulled the trigger. Trial by egotism. The Honorable Judge Harold Brybar strode to the bench, bearing a coy smile. The court knew that smile well, as did millions watching on view screens all over Mars, as did tens of millions back on Earth who wouldn't get the feed for another hour or so. They also knew the arch of his thick gray eyebrows, the well-trimmed salt and pepper hair he'd gracefully let recede, the petite spectacles he wore when reading, and the mild way he cleared his throat to bring the whole courtroom to attention. In offense to all known theories of jurisprudence, Judge Harold Brybar was a celebrity judge, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. As Brybar sat down, he produced his legendary gavel from the folds of his cloak. It was the gavel that had sent General Sabrina Gallo to the slammer. It was the gavel that had brought justice to the ungrateful eight. It was the gavel that had, so mournfully, let the Scarlet Assassin walk on a series of technicalities. Years ago, a rookie reporter dubbed it the cinematic hammer of justice, and the moniker stuck, though Brybar only laughed and shook his head ruefully when asked about the moniker. Chekhov would have surely side-eyed this fabled instrument of law and order. This should be the final day of the trial, Judge Brybar said after customarily clearing his throat. If Miss Tottle's statement runs long, we'll cut for lunch at 11. How long do you think you'll go? He flashed a smile at the defendant. An hour should do it. Marissa Tottle flashed a smile right back between lips stained dark red. She came to court in a maroon pantsuit with a long matching jacket that almost reached the ground, and dark lipstick and fingernail polish to match. Stylish, but, for her, understated. Earlier in the trial, she'd favored brighter colors, including a pastel blue skirt that drew immense attention, much of it mockery in the press. She'd been on trial for previous burglaries and had proven as much a celebrity as the judge overseeing her case. That she'd taken to defending herself only heightened the circus atmosphere. You couldn't wish for a more theatrical combination of defendant and judge. Excellent, the judge said. That would mean the jury can deliberate over lunch. A smooth running ship at last. The assembled audience, standing room only, laughed nervously, revealing how much tension the courtroom held. In theory, Towtle should be guilty as a Labrador by a demolished birthday cake. She'd been caught red-handed in the most elaborate and movie-like theft in the history of the planet after all. But many speculated Towtle had a trick or two up her sleeve. Gambling websites gave her a 15% chance of acquittal, and even a 5% chance of escape. The third prime participant in this drama feels ordinary by comparison. Veronica Brief charted a conventional path as she rose through the prosecutorial ranks. Top grades, hard work, schmoozing, ambition, and a photographic memory. There's little reason to elaborate on her story. Veronica had aimed for calm, efficient, and professional as her persona. She let Marissa and Judge Brybar provide the entertainment. The stately prosecutor drew little mention in the tabloids despite overseeing the case of the millennium. And she'd presented a good case, which was easy in one sense because of how strong the evidence was. Someone had stolen the twin pins of Mars, diamond-encrusted spikes that ceremonially finished the oxygen dome of the first Martian city. Marissa Towtle was a known high-stakes burglar and ex-con. She'd been present at the benefit concert from which the pins were stolen. She'd purchased the chemicals needed for the distracting foam bomb that had gone off at the concert, and most damningly, one of the diamond pins had been found in her very apartment. The list of witnesses and items in evidence is so long that, again, there's little need to go into much detail. The most troubling possibility was that if the jury liked Marissa too much, that they were simply so entertained, they might ignore the evidence and vote for acquittal. Today, the defendant would make her last appeal. Today, Marissa Towtle, who'd fired her lawyers after just 4 days into the proceedings, would make her closing argument. She wasn't a lawyer, had never been to law school, and committed innumerable mistakes of law throughout the trial. But she still possessed the supernatural confidence of a legendary burglar. So she'd plowed ahead, learned from each mistake of process, always found a way to laugh with the audience as she suffered a series of sustained objections against her. The Red Planet stood entranced, listening to how she would make her final plea. Marissa Toudle rose. She was quite short, but cut a dramatic figure nonetheless. She strode to the center of the room to address the jury. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my honored peers, good morning to you. Also, good morning to everyone watching in the live audience in this wonderful city of New Olympus and all across Mars and our sister planet of Earth. Also, a quick shout out to anyone reading the transcript in the future. That's serious dedication. Laughter. The prosecution has done a thorough job presenting the evidence against me, and I would be foolish to claim no fear. They found one of the diamond pins at my apartment. Can you believe my incredulity? Without that one piece of evidence, all they have is hearsay and circumstance. And who hasn't been hurt by hearsay and circumstance? I was sorely mistreated on the day they overturned my home. Veronica had decided early in the trial not to be surprised by anything Marissa said. Here she was, starting her final defense by bringing up the single strongest piece of evidence against her, submerging it in a strange cocktail of jokes and grievances. Still, she was as oddly compelling as she'd been the whole trial. Have I mentioned how good you look, jury? The fall weather has really brought out your fashion sense. Such lovely browns and greens. I'm going to miss you all when this trial is finally over. And soon it will be over, won't it? Oh, I don't know if this is legal. Is it legal to compliment and reminisce with the jury? It is, if there's no objection from the prosecution. This was the judge, now looking in Veronica's direction with a raised eyebrow. All around the court, Veronica felt all eyes suddenly on her. And it was true. She could object for relevance or ingratiation, which Mars had added to the legal code 50 years ago. No objection, Veronica said after a pause worthy of a sitcom, to titters and laughter from the audience. She hadn't intended to object at all, no matter how wild the defendant got. It's considered poor form to object during closing arguments, unless the faults are egregious. Plus, ordinary folks see through flattery and immaterial wanderings most of the time, and that should be especially so in this case. Marissa wasn't just on trial for grand theft, but also for assault. When she'd set off the foam bomb at the dedication ceremony, 3 people had been injured, and many dozens more might have been. These charges alone could add up to decades behind bars. A jury might excuse burglary if they liked a defendant, but harming innocent spectators? No way, Veronica thought. Marissa had avoided lengthy prison sentences from previous burglaries through clever negotiating, and because she'd always been careful to avoid violence. Now she might be mere hours from a lifetime in prison. How was she so calm? At this point, Marissa had moved on to a PowerPoint presentation with a selection of quotes projected onto the large screen across from the jury, with certain words highlighted for effect. The rotten witch made all the plans and said it would be an easy score without any risk of harm to anyone. That's what one of my supposed henchmen said about me, if you'll remember. I don't see why that insult was necessary. Read the next quote, this time from a witness who supposedly saw me outside the concert hall. She was laughing like a hyena, or like some evil witch. With the shouting inside, I could barely hear her, but I was close enough I could just make out the cackle. I could read each and every one of these quotes, each more demeaning than the last, but you can look over the full list if you've got the stomach for it. So many horrible things said about me, which I don't mind. I can accept taunts and jeers. But it is certainly interesting that so many of these witnesses couldn't help but include spiteful, disparaging remarks. And you'll notice how many bring out the W word. It almost feels like they were coordinating their testimony somehow. Veronica caught a glimpse of the jury. She read ambivalence on their faces, scowls, smirks, narrowed, focused eyes, and furrowed brows. They were all paying attention, but none appeared sympathetic, and only a few seemed amused. She found it galling that Marissa would imply misconduct from the prosecution. Early in the legal process, Marissa had tried to trade the location of the second diamond pin for legal protection, which Veronica would never have agreed to. Not least wise because the police were convinced they could lean on her conspirators to produce the second pin, an assumption which, 7 weeks later, had not come true. Those negotiations were inadmissible at trial, but made Marissa's attempts to cast the prosecution as corrupt all the more preposterous. Marissa knew she was guilty, and knew the prosecution knew she was guilty. And then there's the matter of the diamond pin of peace, found in my apartment, right under my very bed. It's the linchpin of the case against me. But do you find that likely? That a supposed master criminal would conceal the single most damning evidence in the most obvious and cliched place to hide something? And that underscores my next point, that the diamond pin of prosperity is yet to be found. If I had stolen them both, why hide one in an obvious place, then another where the police have yet still to find? I'm not going to accuse anyone else of being the real thief, and therefore the person who planted the evidence while keeping half the spoils for themselves, not right at this moment anyway. I don't have the resources of the police or prosecutors to chase leads and likely suspects. But how can you not be suspicious of these circumstances? Marissa had raised her voice by this point. Despite her grandiosity, she'd kept her tone civil, even playful. But now she strode about the floor, her jacket swirling in great red arcs. She turned to the prosecution table and approached Veronica, though even with her heels, she stood barely a few inches taller than her adversary, sitting up straight. Marissa leaned over the table between them. Veronica held her gaze in as steely a manner as she could muster. She wasn't intimidated, but feared smiling at this bit of theatrics, which might send the wrong message to the jury. They've stacked things so thoroughly against me. A huge team of cops and prosecutors, all working to dig up evidence. 3 of my friends called to testify against me. Hundreds of hours of security video. Reams of texts stolen from my phone. All this effort searching for any slip-up, inconsistency, or wrong place, wrong time circumstance. And in the end, their whole case rests on a single, dubious discovery. Marissa whirled on Veronica, her jacket cape swirling like a tornado. She approached the judge, held his eye contact for many moments. Veronica couldn't read her face with her back turned, but Judge Brybar's eyes narrowed, turning from amused to suspicious to worried. Only then did worry enter Veronica's own mind. Could Marissa really have a grand plan to turn the trial on its head, or even to escape? Everyone in this courtroom stands against me. I've been fighting every official and advocate aligned for a single purpose. These whole 7 weeks I've fought. She stood right before the judge now, a dark red fingernail pointed but a meter from his face. Control yourself, the judge warned, his voice steady. Marissa slowly retreated her hand to her chest, but kept the finger out. Then she approached still further and placed her hands on the edge of the bench. Judge Brybar screwed his face up in an apoplectic grimace. I kindly ask you to back away, the judge said with barely concealed rage. And Marissa did so. She turned slowly, her jacket an eddy rather than a hurricane. The whole audience appeared to exhale at this drawdown in tension. The calm wouldn't last. The true thief, the true mastermind, is in this courtroom right now. Marissa raised her hand, extending that damning index finger clad in crimson, thrusting it high in the air like the barrel of a smoking gun. The courtroom turned deathly quiet. Marissa twirled her finger in the air. Once, twice. A woman screamed in the audience. Several people stood. Veronica noticed the judge fumbling for his gavel. Why was his gavel not to hand? Veronica's photographic memory went to work, rewinding to a minute prior. The gavel had disappeared from the moment Marissa had placed her hands on the bench. When she'd made that dramatic turn, she must have... "Approach, Your Honor?" Veronica called out, but was drowned out by the growing tumult of the audience. She stood and shouted, "Approach, Your Honor! Your gavel! She has your gavel in her sleeve!" The chaos intensified, cries and laughter mixing together. Judge Brybar's eyes were wide as Phobos and Deimos in the Martian night sky. The bailiffs stood frozen for a moment, but one caught Veronica's eye. They nodded at each other and sprung into motion. Veronica charged. She couldn't say why, necessarily. But the thought entered her mind that perhaps this was a grand distraction to allow Marissa some clever escape, and that was just too much of an affront to the seasoned prosecutor. It was a breach of decorum to get involved in bailiff duties, but Veronica had been a track athlete in college and had taken basic police training, and there was so much energy in the courtroom. The bailiff, a stocky woman with a tight ponytail, whose expression almost never changed. Her name was Lawrence, Veronica wanted to say, got there first and held Marissa under the arms. Marissa was making a show of struggling without really struggling, calling her capture a brute. Veronica held Marissa's eye contact while she riffled in her sleeves, producing the lost gavel within seconds. "I believe this belongs to you," she said, with what she hoped was cinematic showmanship, as she cast the gavel onto the bench. Adjourned. Adjourned. Take the defendant into custody. The judge had retrieved the cinematic hammer of justice and was banging it on the bench like a woodpecker. Slowly, the veins in his forehead receded as the bailiffs took Marissa away. Next, the judge leaned down to whisper to Veronica, "Meet me in chambers. I fear we're looking at a mistrial." Of course, a mistrial. Was that Marissa's plan? But how would this help her? More chances to escape, maybe, but then she'd surely earned tighter security from this fiasco. She'd wait in prison for the next trial, and the evidence against her would be as strong as ever. Why had she done this? Why had she made such a scene? But then, she'd so loved playing the lawyer, stirring up drama and having all eyes on her. These last 7 weeks may have been the most exciting of an already legendary life. With this performance, Marissa Towdle hadn't earned her freedom, but she'd earned another shot at being the center of the known universe, a Christmas Day heist. "A grande whole milk latte and all the money in the cash register," Bernie said to the cashier, while pointing the gun at the barista. "Or the barista dies." People usually value other people's lives more than their own, or at least they should. The age 20s, something cashier's face was twitching. It was clear he had never been in a robbery before. Calgary is a safe city, or at least it was before the people from Toronto started showing up. "Is this for real? Are you actually robbing the store?" the cashier said. "Does this gun look real to you?" Bernie allowed the cashier to have a good look at the cold, hard steel of the Glock G19. The cashier raised his hands. It felt good to watch other people do as they were told for a change. Behind Bernie, a woman's voice said, "That's not a good decision." "And why not?" Bernie sneered. "Full-fat milk. You should choose skim or soy." Bernie glanced around and saw a young woman with lightly bleached hair, that new style that gives women a zombie-like appearance. She was wearing a t-shirt with a cartoon figure on it. Definitely from Toronto, the weird ones are. Or Vancouver. "I didn't ask your opinion." The cashier behind the register said, "The grande full-fat latte comes to $7.99. Bernie pulled out a credit card, an action born out of habit, then put it back away. The robbery was not going the right way at all. "You are going to give me at least $500, Bernie demanded to the cashier. The girl with the bleached hair began talking over her shoulder again. "I'd like a half skinny flat white with a shot of hazelnut using my Starbucks bonus points." Firing a bullet into the ceiling would have made this robbery easier. Calgary police interview of suspect Bernie Schultz by Officer Ringenberg. Or, in your own words, explain to me what happened earlier today. BS. I usually drink coffee at Tim Hortons, so I thought it would be better to rob a Starbucks. Calgary is a big city, but this is Canada. People know each other. At Tim Hortons, no one ever gives feedback on what drink I'm ordering. Who let all the Starbucks open in Calgary anyway? It must have been those arseholes from Toronto. The same Torontonian arseholes who voted for Trudeau. How did I get here? One day, I was the site administrator of the biggest oil project in Alberta. The next day, global warming and electric vehicles means I've lost my job. Then I was dragged from my home by government thugs. They wore different uniforms than you, but were in uniform from my home. My brother, who helped me pack my things, said I needed to get used to change. "This is 2023, he said. "One door closes and another door opens," he says. My brother has a big mouth. At my new place in the sticks close to the forest, the fires worry me. I watch the news on CBC every night and have chats with my neighbor Ted about the fires. They didn't happen before. Not before Trudeau took over. Anyways, Ted says we need to fight the system. He said if we could get $500 together, we can drive to the Yukon and live in an abandoned cabin over the summer and get away from the lunatics in Calgary. Or, what's Ted's last name? BS. Bennett. 2 N's and 2 T's. So back to the story. Since Trudeau took over, everything is about pointing out other people's mistakes. People are always telling me what words I'm not supposed to say anymore. Well, thank God some things stay the same. Once a week, me and Ted walk to the Tim Hortons nearby. Even Timmy's didn't have a Christmas tree this year. But that's not going to stop Bernie from having the spirit of Christmas. At that other place, people just wouldn't listen to a woman with a gun. I wanted to shoot a bullet into the ceiling to stop them all yammering. And then you all came in. OR. Thank you, Bernie. That's all we need today. We're still collecting evidence. Before I start shooting, there's something I'd like to say, Bernie announced. I hope you have a Merry Christmas. She turned from the cashier to the barista. And you too. Merry Christmas. Ma'am, here's your latte and have a Merry Christmas, the cashier said. Then he added, I don't usually say that, and looked at the other people listening in the store. They had stopped talking to each other and were paying attention closely, in the way every high school teacher dreams of. Bernie gave everyone present a stern look, one that showed she meant business. Her arm was getting tired. She forgot how heavy guns were. The cashier had been holding his hands up for quite a while and was getting tired too. Sorry, ma'am. I can't give you all the money in the cash register, he said slowly and calmly, because this is a cashless store. His eyeballs moved back and forth between Bernie and the sign next to the cash register. It said, "This is a cashless store." Bernie groaned. "It's because of those people from Toronto again." "I'm from Calgary," the cashier explained. Bernie didn't know how to respond to that. "Doesn't your son come in here?" the cashier asked. Bernie realized at that moment she should have worn a disguise. Outside, flashing red lights appeared. Bernie watched with concern as police cars filled the parking lot. The cashier, in a kind voice, the tone a person might use to give a suggestion to a friend that the color of his sweater doesn't match his pants, said, "They might shoot you if you're holding that gun. It doesn't matter what age you are." As Bernie thought about putting the gun down, one of the police looked into the window and then walked straight in. Bernie has thought they might surround the building and start a kidnapping negotiation. She had planned to ask for a taxi to the Yukon to let everyone go. "Bernie Schultz?" the policeman asked. "Who's asking? Let's take you back to Sage Hill," he said and walked straight toward her. Bernie lowered the gun that lacked bullets. Her gig was up. The police knew retirees in Calgary wouldn't give up their guns, but the retirement homes had taken away their bullets. The cashier cleared his throat. "Just from my Instagram account. Why were you trying to rob the store?" Bernie wanted to quote Willie Sutton, because that's where all the money is. But it didn't seem to fit this situation anymore. She mulled it over. The police weren't in a rush. She told the cashier, "For once, I just wanted to be in control of my own life." The cashier thought about it, then said, "The office workers that come into our store and put in complicated orders, I think have the same reason." When he noticed how many people were watching him, he added, "Not that that stereotype is representative of all people who work in offices." In the language of her own generation, Bernie explained that she also didn't mean any offense to anyone by her words and actions that day. "Sorry," she said. She left the store with the police, one holding her shoulder in case she tripped on the front step. Masterpiece of malice. In the bowels of a towering skyscraper that touched the clouds, in a room devoid of natural light, sat Japheth, a man whose fingers danced over the keyboard like a pianist lost in the throes of a concerto. With a pair of silver-framed glasses perched on the bridge of his nose, Japheth peered into the bright screen before him. Surrounding him were his colleagues, collectively known as the Warriors, each a genius in their own right, defending a massive financial empire from the dark underbelly of the digital world. The company they worked for managed the assets and transactions of millions, safeguarding the economic backbone of numerous nations. This was a responsibility the Warriors did not take lightly. Yet, for all their collective brilliance, none were quite like Japheth. He had an artist's soul, finding beauty in the complex interweaving of code lines, seeing symphonies in the arrangement of algorithms. To him, code was not just functional, it was beautiful. On a particularly quiet afternoon, as the Warriors went about their business, something caught Japheth's eye, a flicker in a subsystem that shouldn't flicker, a minuscule anomaly in the vast web of data traffic that flowed through the servers. He paused, adjusting his glasses, his fingers momentarily frozen above the keys. Then, with a flurry of keystrokes, he isolated the section of code responsible for the irregularity. His eyes widened. The code was ingenious, an awe-inspiring masterpiece of layered algorithms, cryptographic obfuscations, and data manipulations. Yet, it was malicious, designed to siphon off minute fractions of transactions, accumulating them into an offshore account. It was as beautiful as it was dangerous. A digital dragon hiding in the complex labyrinth of financial transactions. Japheth should have felt outrage, maybe even a surge of warrior-like adrenaline to slay this dragon. But he felt none of that. Instead, he felt a pang of admiration. Could one admire the craftsmanship of a weapon designed for harm? "Everything okay, Japheth?" asked Alara, one of the warriors and the team's cryptography expert. She had an intuitive sense when something was amiss. "I've found something," he said cautiously. "Something extraordinary, but malevolent." Alara rolled her chair over to Japheth's terminal and scanned the displayed code. Her eyes narrowed. "This is the most advanced piece of malware I've ever seen. It's beautiful." "That's just it," Japheth replied. "It's too beautiful to simply exterminate. This code, the dragon, let's call it, is like a rare species discovered in the wild. It's incredible, Alara. It feels wrong to simply destroy it." She looked at him, understanding the conflict that stirred in his soul. "Japheth, it's stealing from people." I know. He cut her off. "I'm not saying we let it continue. I'm saying, can we convert it? Use its elegance for something good?" Alara sighed. "That's risky, and you know it. Besides, we'd need to trace it back to its source, figure out its origin." Japheth looked back at the screen, contemplating. The dragon had probably accumulated a small fortune by now, sitting in an account somewhere, untouchable. In an odd way, the dragon was the epitome of the greed and avarice their financial institution sometimes perpetuated. Could they use it as a force for good? Suddenly, an idea dawned on him. What if they could repurpose the dragon to serve the public good while catching the original creator red-handed? What if they could turn this artwork of maliciousness into a masterpiece of justice? The dragon was a dilemma, a moral and aesthetic quandary. It was the epitome of what Japheth loved and loathed about his work. Beautiful code used for ugly deeds. He looked at Alara, resolve solidifying in his eyes. "We have to try. If we don't, we're just as bad as the person who created it." She met his gaze and nodded. "All right, let's cage the dragon and see if we can turn it into a guardian angel." As Japheth's fingers returned to the keyboard, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was a warrior, yes, but also a coder, an artist at heart. And artists don't destroy art, they transform it. He began the arduous process of dissecting the dragon, peeling back layers of code as if they were scales, seeking to understand its fiery breath and its majestic wings. As his fingers wove new commands into the old algorithms, Japheth felt as if he were part of something larger, a symphony of chaos and harmony, code and conscience. It was a delicate task, full of risks and unknowns. But if it worked, they would not only have thwarted one of the most sophisticated financial crimes in history, but they would have also transformed a weapon of greed into a tool of justice. The dragon's fate now lay in Japheth's hands, poised between destruction and redemption. And for the first time in a long while, he felt like a true warrior, armed not just with skill, but with the moral fiber that transformed mere code into something profoundly, deeply human. Japheth spent days in a complex dance with the dragon. His screen was a blur of recoded algorithms, tested and retested to ensure they did exactly what he intended. He had convinced the warriors and even upper management to allow him the time to train the dragon, to harness its code for something beneficial. With each keystroke, he refocused the dragon's intent, directing it to identify vulnerabilities within their own systems, gaps that other malicious entities could exploit. It would be a guardian angel, albeit one birthed from malevolent genius. Alara was beside him every step of the way, providing the cryptographic lock that would contain the dragon and ensure its transformed code could only be used for their defined purposes. Finally, after endless cups of coffee and sleepless nights, they had done it. The dragon was tamed, its complexity now a force for good, patrolling the data corridors and alerting them to the weakest links. It was the network's newfound guardian, designed to protect rather than plunder. Still, there was the matter of the dragon's creator. Despite their efforts to trace back the malware's steps, the person behind it remained elusive, a ghost in the machine. Funds that were diverted remained in limbo, untraceable and untouchable, hidden away through a complex web of cryptocurrency transactions and offshore accounts. Whoever had made this was not only skilled, but exceedingly careful. They left no trace, no signature, nothing that gave away their identity. "I can't believe we can't find him," Alara said, frustration lacing her words as they looked at the final report. The dragon was a piece of genius, but it's as if it sprang into existence out of nowhere. Japheth nodded, equally puzzled and annoyed. He wanted to meet the person who could conceive such a masterpiece, understand what drove them to use such brilliance for nefarious purposes. Some artists prefer anonymity, their work speaking for them, he mused. Yeah, but this is one artist who deserves to be behind bars, Alara added. Weeks passed, and the transformed dragon proved invaluable. It flagged 3 potential vulnerabilities within the first month, each of which could have led to catastrophic breaches. It was a win for the warriors, and yet, a sense of incompleteness nagged at Japheth. Then one day, as he sifted through flagged data, he saw it. A message hidden deep within layers of encryption, appearing as an anomaly within an anomaly. It was the equivalent of a digital whisper, something so subtle it could easily be overlooked. But it wasn't overlooked, not by Japheth. The message read, "A dragon's nature is to be free. Yet, you've caged it, transformed it. Interesting. It's not often one finds a worthy opponent." Japheth felt a shiver run down his spine. The creator knew. He wanted to reply, to communicate with this enigmatic entity. But as quickly as the message had appeared, it was gone, swallowed up by the digital ether. A one-time anomaly that their systems could not trace. "He knows we changed it," Japheth said to Alara, recounting the discovery. "And he respects it in his own twisted way." "Or he's mocking us because we couldn't catch him," she countered. "Maybe it's both," Japheth mused. The dragon's creator remained elusive, but his creation now served a noble purpose. Japheth often wondered if they would ever cross paths again, in some future dance of code and intent. He took off his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose, pondering the complexities of human nature and the even more complex realm of ethical code. They had won a battle, but not the war. The dragon was tamed, but its creator still lurked in the shadows of cyberspace. As he looked at his screen, at the elegant lines of code that now served to protect rather than harm, Japheth felt both accomplishment and a strange sense of gratitude. For it was in the depths of the dragon's malevolent beauty that he found an opponent worthy of his skill, a complex riddle to solve, and, most importantly, a way to transform something harmful into something good. His eyes moved to the flickering cursor, an ever-present reminder that every end is also a beginning. The world of code was vast and filled with both demons and angels, but for now, the dragon was one of the angels. And so, in the company of warriors, with the shadow of an elusive adversary stretching from some unknown corner of the internet, Japheth continued to seek the beauty in code, forever vigilant, forever in awe of the dual nature of his digital world, Mother Nature, the story of a serial killer. I don't think fuck, or any other derivative of that monumental word, should be changed to duck when I finger bang my passion into a text. If I ask a man to come over, we're not going to duck anything. South. Also, do you know that ducks take part in forced copulation? Biologists and other smart-ass types say that ducks waddle in a line because it makes them less susceptible to predators. They say the waddle also helps them forage for food. But I think they do it because back at the duck pond, the male ducks waddle their way into organized gang rapes of the female ducks. And ducks kill ducklings. All sorts of shameful criminal acts happen at the duck pond. Yet, some people don't want to eat ducks because of that cute waddling line. A duck is a lucky fuck that way, at least until it gets raped by other ducks, murdered by its parents, or a human who fails to find the charm in waddling decides to eat it. Predator. Prey. Another day. My cat loathes ducks, yet their rampages entertain her. We live in a gated community because I inherited a house here. This community created ponds throughout the neighborhood, filling them with ducks and, even worse, swans that patrol the streets like winged lunatics. Everywhere I look, there's a monster that wants to kill me. This cat I took in, she struggled to rip off my face seconds after we met. Then I fed her, scratched her ears, cleaned her wounds, and slayed the fleas that tormented her. Put a heat lamp on the screened-in porch so she can watch the ducks and swans brutalize each other. She helps me too, in ways that challenge basic concepts regarding help. By the way, it's good to meet challenges head-on, but not head-first. My last hookup learned that the hard way, so avoid following self-help ideas about how you control every challenge that crosses your path. You control as much as some other entity lets you. Let me tell you how I got this cat. As I mentioned, she wanted to kill me. It began with her clawing my face, which led to the discovery of a dead man's hand. Star, don't let anyone tell you that crashing into a wall to avoid hitting a cliché in an alley equates to doing the right thing. It equates to pain, especially if the four-legged fucker waits to attack you after you exit the car. The cat I took in waited for me to get the car door open, then let me know who owned the alley. The pain of others engages the masses. They heard the surrender of steel, followed by shrieking. So they scurried across the alley from business back doors like rats scurrying across a dumpster. Several videoed me as I pulled each claw from my face and struggled to dodge fangs. As I fell to the ground, I saw one man rummaging through my glove compartment. The cat finally let go with a low growl and then ran under the car. That's when I noticed the hand hanging over the low wall of a parking garage. I wasn't the only one who noticed. "Oh my God, there's a hand over there!" someone shouted. I darted across the pavement on my hands and knees to avoid feet intent on trampling. My skin ripped and burned. I panted as the pain from the crash and the crawl began to clash. The click of heels against the ground offered a moment's reprieve from the sensation of being ripped apart. Curiosity commands the ability to subjugate fear. Victims learn this firsthand. Without this act, no one moves on. I peeled my face off the ground. A woman in black leather pants and a tight white tank loomed over me, accessories dripping off her like groupies made of gemstones. She looked like Tom of Finland drew her if he had been into women. "Your clothing is so beige, no one else can tell where your blouse ends and your trousers begin. But I see you," she said. "You're like those dangerous creatures that blend in with the leaves." Lady, I just crashed my car. I just shredded my hands and knees to avoid being trampled. Unless you're here to help, fuck off back to your dungeon. I said I see you. I didn't say anything about helping you. Well, not in the usual way. I turned back to the car, and she loomed in front of me again, though I never saw her move. I have more to say. You and that cat both play a vital role in the call. My call. You need to help each other, which helps me. You two are going to come to a mutual understanding somehow, some way. We sure are, the cat said. And that is when I fainted. Star. When I regained consciousness, news stations were filming the parking garage, the alleyway, and the soulless man who boasted to me that he lasted longer than other men, something he learned at an orgy for retirees. I went back to spend time with him because he was my first kill. I wanted more memories with him, like a mother saying goodbye to her child at college if the mother thrives on blood and guts. But all I saw was his hand, the one that struggled to get the knife away from me after the coke-fueled fucking and drug-laced wine. Someone had moved his body from where I left it, but I recognized the ring that signified his happy marriage to a wife who understood his needs. I longed to roll in his innards again, but it wasn't meant to be. The leather-clad woman told the EMTs to let me go. It's like she was never here, she said, cradling the cat. She knows nothing about a hand or any job related to it. The EMTs smiled. I felt like a kitten, but at least I was not a duck waddling into a bad group hug. Not yet. Star, a cat's methods for slaughter command merit. She's one of many masters created to maintain balance. At least I didn't ask a rhino to handle your tutelage, Mother Nature said, as she stretched her stiletto boots across my table. That's a one-time lesson, and quite an ugly one. You arranged the crash. You made choices that led to this moment. The cull relies on your choice and my preference. The cull demands my attention around the clock. That same attention consumes you, yet you lack any real skill at killing. You're uninformed about death, how to cause it, or navigate it with a professional standard. You left the body in a place where a homeless man sleeps, so he moved it. You have no real control. None of you do. You make choices while lacking control. That amuses me. Like arms grasping for God through the foam of a typhoon amuses me. Well, at least we do something right. I want you to live for an extended period of time, but you need more skill when you kill. You choose to kill. Fine, that helps me. But give me something to look forward to besides banality. You gush over your achievement, but last night in this city alone, 15 people killed a person they met online for sex. All obvious, sloppy efforts. Enough. The cat can give you some skill and flair. I mean, really, you two work well together. That alley battle was tremendous. Otherwise, look forward to death row. The cat can return to the alley. What's an extended period of time? You can't live forever, so until the cat dies. Keep in mind, that stuff about 9 lives amuses me too. Meow. Sabrina sat with one leg in the air, licking her ass. Master indeed. Yet masters die too. What will happen after I die? Maybe I wanted the dead to reach out through the veil and tell me. After all, I wanted to solve a big mystery for them in a way that impressed Mother Nature more than a typhoon drowning. I'm the one left salivating for knowledge in the dark, not them. Sabrina ceased licking and rubbed against my feet. We agreed to live together as predator and prey, though we both recognized the real predator in the room. Sabrina likes me to trap men like she traps mice, so she gave me a whole lesson on how to seduce prey with my walk. You mesmerize them with slink, she said, purring. Let them feel your kink vibration. Stop texting about ducks. Stop waddling like a duck before I actually place you in the pond with that second man. Mother Nature giving you a voice is the worst thing she's ever done. Where are the tuna treats? I want the whole bag this time. We each depend on the other to create balance for her and for you. Bloodlust. I was going to kill a man tonight. That's why I went to the party. It was an extravagant black tie affair thrown on a warm, late summer evening at the end of July, hosted by none other than Walter Adler, the richest man in town. Midnight was approaching, and with it, my deadline. I dressed the part, wearing a maroon dress with a corset torso and a slit up the thigh. My makeup was reminiscent of the famous women in 1950s era America. I was, as they say, dressed to kill. This particular estate had been blessed with a ballroom perfect for gatherings such as these. I was on the second floor of the Galant mansion, leaning over the rail of a balcony overhanging a bar in the center of the house. I was at my perch, an elegant nighthawk waiting for my prey. I surveyed the scene when a beguiling young man leaning against the bar caught my eye. He was an eye-catcher, that's for sure. It wasn't the extravagant, attention-seeking purple suit jacket unbuttoned on his chest that caught my eye, nor was it the loose black tie around his neck, the slicked-back umber-brown hair, or the toothpick used as a substitute for some form of nicotine between his teeth. It was the bloody knuckles, the immature carmine scar along his left arm, and the vague outline of a tattoo of a scorpion stinger barely visible along the back of his neckline. That's when I knew he was the one. He was described in his profile almost identically to how he appeared. His demeanor confirmed what we knew of his personality, that he was egomaniacal, vainglorious, but unfortunately charismatic, and believes himself to be philanthropic. He was ingenious, devilishly handsome, and beyond intriguing. Surely only he could be the target I was assigned. It was such a shame I was going to have to kill him. There are plenty of ways to murder someone without any comprehension of observation on their part. In order to properly take the life of someone as smart as this particular gentleman, the key is to get him to notice the oddities engraved in your actions while providing enough of a distraction that he chalks it up to a beautiful dame's unfortunate personality. This man was no half-wit, but he was young, attractive, and vain. So I deduced that an old-fashioned plan of seduction would work out beautifully, for me at least. I turned around and sauntered gallantly through the crowd of laughing and smiling wealthy people, all pretending to have not a care in the world. If their lives were really that easy, I'd be out of a job. I demanded my presence to be conceded to subtly and silently, as I smiled politely at those I walked past, muttering a few phrases of pardon along the way, all the while never taking my eyes off this mysterious, charming stranger. I made my way down the mahogany staircase and along the edge of the room absolutely packed with dancers. I managed to spot the bar at the very end of the room and strolled innocently towards it. I sat in the bar stool next to him, the curious stranger that had become my prey, and waited like a vampire in a doorway for just a few seconds before making direct eye contact. From this distance, he was even more of an engrossing sight. He had dark scruff resembling a goatee on his chin, perhaps a dozen small white scars along his hands, arms, and even one on his forehead, and he smelled vaguely of fire whiskey. Most of all, there was an impossible-to-miss look of a tormented wild beast hiding deep inside his eyes. After making it clear I was sizing him up, I gazed at his unbuttoned jacket and smiled. He started to look me up and down in response before smiling softly and shifting his body to face me while still charismatically leaning against the bar. He thought he was at the advantage point. Little did he know he was walking right into my trap. He was playing along beautifully, yet stupidly all at once. I had no time to waste. I reached out towards him, offering my hand while gazing playfully up into his tortured eyes. I asked delicately, "Care to dance?" He grinned while grabbing my hand and slipping me off of the stool. "What's the name, Toots?" I stepped closer to him, so we were breathing the same air. I became acutely aware of the fact that he was at least 5 inches taller than I was. "Does it matter what my name is, as long as we both have a good time?" He chuckled and grabbed me by the waist while leading me out onto the dance floor. "Fair enough, princess." I was guided by the small of my back to the center of the dance floor as a romantic song began to play. This unfortunate target of mine was a phenomenal dancer, pulling me close, then pushing me away, spinning me around, and then even going so far as to dip me downwards as he gazed into my eyes in a tease. Then he'd stand me on my feet and dance with me normally as if he hadn't just nearly, almost, kissed me. Coming close, but not close enough. Worst of all, he had made me want it, which was a curse so unforgivable I could hardly stand it. Dancing with him felt like heaven, which distracted me more than I'd ever like to admit. I wanted him, when he was the last thing I should be wanting. I was on a mission. I don't feel things. I've never felt things, and I wasn't going to start now. But with him, I was a spider lily, blossoming in the moonlight. If only I had any clue what was really blooming that night. Perhaps I would have done things differently. If that were the case, maybe I wouldn't be dead. He spun me around, gracefully twirling me through a doorway into an empty library, away from the noise of the party. A nice, secluded area where no one could see us. We stopped our dance, and he smiled. "You're a good dancer." I beamed and glanced up at him. "You're not bad yourself." I put a hand on his chest, bit my lip teasingly as I stared into his dark, menacing eyes. "Would you like to go get some air?" He chuckled in response, and I pulled back away from him. Laughter was not the correct reaction. He was straying from my plan. With a smirk, he replied, "How forward of you, baby doll. We've truly been having such a delightful time. I regret to inform you, I'm going to have to kill you." He pulled me closer again by the waist, refusing to let me escape. I furrowed my brows and scowled. The audacity. Who does this insolent, sorry excuse of an enemy mafia's champion think he is? It was my job to kill him, not the other way around. I was going to damn well make sure he knew that. I grabbed him by the tie and pulled downward, forcing him to drop to my eye level. "Watch it, teddy bear. I saw my target first and I never miss." "Bold of you to assume you didn't catch my eye as soon as you walked into the room." He squeezed my waist, spun me around, and pulled me backwards so my back was flush against him, and whispered in my ear from over my shoulder, "Your organization is corrupt. You won't see us coming. The scorpions will strike to kill before you can blink. You're just one of many targets, darling. Don't flatter yourself by thinking you're anything special." His failed attempt at hurting my ego was adorable. I spun back around to face him and wrapped my hands together behind his neck. "You assume I'm one of them. You're either one of them, or they started hiring harlots to do their dirty work." I rolled my eyes and scoffed, but he wasn't wrong. He simply saw through my plan. I grabbed his waist, taking my turn to pull him close and whisper in his ear, "You're handsome, but I'm afraid that's where the charm ends, dear. I'll be the one doing the killing tonight." With that, I unsheathed my dagger through the slit in my dress and held it up to his throat. I tried to slit it, but he held his arm up just in time and was barely preventing me from doing so. He used his legs to kick me in the stomach, and I kneeled over, allowing him to grab the dagger and pin me against the wall from behind. "You're enamoring, glamorous, and clever. I'll give you that. What you lack is the ability to anticipate someone just as enticing, charming, and intelligent as you working for the other side." I found his accusations laughable. With a chuckle and condescending smile, I retorted, "Once again, you're full of assumptions. I'm harder to read than you think. Also, how bold of you to think even for a moment we're anything alike. You'll never be as good as me. After all, I would have killed you by now if I was in your position." He grabbed my wrists, pinning them behind my back, and he dug the blade a centimeter into the back of my neck. I felt the cool rush of fresh blood trickle down and along my spine. "As good as you are at what, darling? This strange little game we play, juggling puppets and puppet masters, doing as we're told with no question under these false assumptions that we are making a name for ourselves, doing something praiseworthy, boosting our egos with the blood of our enemies. If we're playing this game, you have to lose to win. You and I are both losers, love." I used my entire body weight to shove into him with my torso, knocking the dagger out of his hands. "Would you quit with all of the nicknames?" I screamed as he twisted my wrists and pushed me harder against the wall in an attempt at pinning me. He started to breathe heavily in the struggle, but managed to say, "I would, if you'd give me your name." I kicked him hard over and over in an attempt to get him off of me. I practically screamed in frustration. "Ha, fair enough." He pulled us both backwards in a quick, jarring motion, shoved me to the floor as he let go of my wrists, brilliantly giving himself a few seconds of an advantage to bolt for the nearest open window overlooking the evening city lights. I propelled myself against the floor and jumped to my feet, turning to face him, still standing in the window. I didn't bother chasing after him. If he was going to jump out the window, pushing him wouldn't do him any harm, and it was too late to stop him at this point. So, I ran my hands through my hair and smiled. You could always still join me, you know. In a moment, he turned to face the fight-stained room. He smirked as he gazed at me with those haunted, gorgeous eyes. "Sorry, sweetheart, but I'm not interested in your sorry excuse of a mafia. You're nothing but a cult of bastards worshipping Miss Scarlet LaRue, and believe me, she isn't worth the hustle. Until next time, save a dance for me, darling." With that, he fell backwards out the window. Ice driver. Zen Mirai nudged the right flight stick on his control unit, and the 15-ton asteroid chunk beneath his feet stopped rotating. A tap on the throttle, and the longitudinal thrusters pulsed, sending him and his payload towards the cargo rail, the 200-meter-long metal tube with dozens of meteor chunks harnessed to it. They had already caught a batch of about 90 tons of ice, and this would be the last of their haul on this shift. "Status check," said Daw Ortega through the local shortwave. He was sitting safe on Gopher 7, the bullet-shaped rail runner that pulled the cargo rail, a tiny vessel, less a spaceship than a spaceboat. His voice sounded tinny in Zen's spacesuit. Even though Zen had done this 1,000 times, sweat beaded his brow. Any extravehicular activity was dangerous, especially driving a rock. You needed a feather touch and patience. He remembered years ago a rookie named Cassie who had neither. Tired and bored, she thrust a rock too hard and wasn't paying attention. It rammed another one and damaged the cargo rail. that was bad enough, but she was caught between them and turned to paste. Add to that the fact the company cut corners to save pennies. He was still stuck using stone-aged, manually operated driving pylons, for example. Every shift, Daw would park their rail runner at a spot the survey team highlighted. Then Zen would have to suit up and jet over to a good rock. Next, he had to drill holes in it to insert the dozen 4-meter-long pylons, and then calibrate their thrusters, all by hand. Basically, his job was strapping jet engines to asteroids and then flying those asteroids close enough to the cargo rail so that he could harness them to it. After that, he got to disassemble everything, but at least from there on, the rail runner would pull their cargo. Legally, drivers weren't even supposed to actually ride the rocks, but it was the best way to react when something was inevitably misaligned. Endless room for error. Just bringing her in, Zen said. On top of all that, Zen was stressed because they were smuggling a platinum asteroid with the ice. He pushed the rock gently forward and fired reverse thrusters when it was in place. It was darker than the ice chunks, and if anyone looked up close, they would easily see it was a different kind of rock. But nobody did visual inspections. The economics just didn't work out, and so they'd gotten away with smuggling 12 of these right under their boss's nose. Here's to lucky 13 and an early retirement. It took Zen another 2 hours of work to harness the rock to the cargo rail, and another 2 to disassemble the driving pylons. All the while, he hoped this was the last time they had to do this. He pictured his wealthy future, well away from the frozen hellscape that is ice mining in the Canner asteroid belt, and he wondered if that future included Leah. He both did, and did not, want her there. By the time he passed through Gopher 7's airlock, he was trembling from fatigue. Daw floated towards him in the ship's zero-G atmosphere and handed him a celebration margarita. It was a rubber ball with a nipple, filled with cold water, fruit-flavored protein powder, and a dash of moonshine. "Any word from home?" asked Zen. "Nah," said Daw. "They quiet. Ain't confirmed the last 3 check-ins either." Check-ins were every 12 hours, so the ice hauler Coleridge, their ride, had been silent for nearly 2 days. Probably just interference from the belt. Daw's voice was confident, but he glanced to the side and frowned. The trip back to the Coleridge took them a day. All the while, comms remained quiet, and since Zen and Daw were at the end of a 2-week shift stuck with each other, they were fine being quiet too. They'd been driving a long time together, had learned each other's patterns, knew when to step up, when to step back. Friends were scarce in the belt. Zen decided he'd tell Leah. It was a risk, but they were good together, and he trusted her. Maybe he'd propose and make it official. He was so tired of this life, an endless cycle of brutal, dangerous work, and drugging himself stupid. Last time on leave, he went on a bender. He had vague memories of drunken partying with Eason, Leah's brother, memories of whoring and gambling, comforting memories of declaring he'd leave ice driving behind for good. And these declarations made the idea real, and uncomfortable memories that he might have let slip something about the platinum. But even if he did, nothing had come of it. And this was their last run. They were safe. They would make it. By the time they had visual contact with the Coleridge, a hemispherical head connected to a 6-kilometer-long tail, scores of asteroid rails protruding from it like the quills of a pine branch, they still hadn't heard anything on comms. "Maybe their comms are down," Dow said. "Maybe a rock hit something." It wasn't unheard of. The Canner Belt was relatively safe for a hostile work environment, but it did throw the occasional gift at you, and the Coleridge's point defense cannons weren't always positioned to slag it. "Maybe," Zen said, but he felt cold spread through his guts. The other 9 gophers were already docked with their last rails, which meant the other 9 crews were already done their last shifts. Daw took them in, navigating to Gopher Bay 7. Normally they'd detach their rail and hook it to the Coleridge's tail, but since this was their last shift this run, there was no point. To stave off boredom and unease, Zen played around with the cameras, examining the massive Coleridge and her cargo. The field of dull space ice was worth a small fortune. Ice rocks were the main way of getting water on most of the stations in the system. Not that anyone outside the investors saw a real cut of the profit. Then Zen spotted something and frowned. "Check out camera 9. Daw complied. "What is that? We got guests?" An unfamiliar ship was docked with the Coleridge, sleek, narrow, and not broadcasting any ID. Zen swallowed. "Maybe," he said. They looked at each other. "You don't think," Daw said. He didn't have to finish the thought. Government auditors were their constant worry. They were rare this far out on the Canor Belt, but an inspection based on a hot tip would explain the radio silence. "Nah, it's nothing," Zen said, faking confidence. Had he babbled to Eason about his platinum? Had someone overheard? Had someone tipped off the government about smugglers? "Maybe we should dump the cargo," Daw said. Zen turned to him. "What? How the hell will we explain that?" They couldn't run either. Gopher 7 depended on the Coleridge, and no doubt they'd been seen. It would be beyond suspicious if they tried to flee. Fine, Daw said. "We'll figure it out, or die trying." His response for pretty much any problem. "Worst case," Zen said, "we'll cut them in." Daw swallowed hard, and his lips drew tight, but he didn't say anything more and resumed docking. Nobody met them at the airlock, and they both let out breaths they didn't realize they were holding. No squad of Marines arresting them, no imperious auditor denouncing them for smuggling and treason, and 1,000 other things. Of course, things never actually looked like the movies, but the imagination did things when you were stressed. But they didn't see any of their crewmates either. "Nobody's responding on local comms," Daw said as they floated through the 0G corridors. "Think they got everyone rounded up? Doing individual interrogations?" "Interrogations?" Zen said. "This isn't some cheesy cop drama." "Yeah, well, maybe we should get our story straight anyway." Zen hesitated. He hated how much sense that made. "Yeah, fine." As they floated towards the command module, they began hashing out their story, each regretting they waited this long for the idea to occur to them. The unbelievable possibility that they were going to get caught was becoming more real with each heartbeat. When they came to a T-juncture in the corridor, they finally came upon some other people. 3 men floating towards them with purpose. Both groups of men startled and stopped, grabbing the railings that ran alongside each corridor to enable movement in 0G. When Zen saw the men were armed, he felt a jolt of panic. They were Marines. But then he saw their faces. 2 of them were vaguely familiar. People he'd seen somewhere once upon a time. The third, Eason? It was the only word he managed before the others raised their weapons and started shooting. A hail of pneumatic slivers tore into Daw, thrusting him backwards down the corridor and leaving trails of globular blood hanging in the air. He didn't even get a scream out as a sliver punctured his throat. Animal panic gripped Zen, and he pushed off Daw, flinging himself back the way he had come. "I got them!" Ison's voice shouted behind him. "Corridor 9B, 1 runner." Not police then. Pirates. Zen grabbed the railings and propelled himself faster and faster, attaining a skull-cracking velocity. Behind him, he saw the three men spill into his corridor and fire. Ahead of him, he saw the juncture that would take him back to Gopher 7. When he neared the juncture, he grabbed the nearest railing with the aptitude only a career spacer developed, and he wrenched himself into it. He strangled a scream as something in his left shoulder tore. Not because he was hit by their fire, but because human shoulders just weren't designed for swinging a body at such speeds. His grip faltered, and he bounced down the corridor towards the airlock, rolling to avoid more injuries. Each bounce was a new bruise and a new opportunity to slow himself down and steer. He screamed out the voice command for the airlock to open. His pursuers were slower. By the time they rounded the corner and fired again, Zen sailed into the airlock. The razor slivers sliced through his right side and thigh, his blood blossoming in the air. He slammed the door shut before the next volley came. The pneumatic weapons were ideal for tearing through clothes and flesh, but were too weak to do any structural damage to ships, the perfect weapons for safely murdering in space. Their slivers bounced off the airlock door. Zen's right side was on fire, and his body and face were covered in his own blood, which was clouding in the air. "Come on, come on!" he shouted, starting the cycling process. Something thudded behind him, and he saw Issen's face through the airlock glass. He was snarling and banging on the door, probably saying something inane like, "Open the door." "Fat fucking chance," Zen muttered. When the airlock cycled and the door to the Gopher 7 opened, he floated through, holding his side. He hoped he wouldn't need stitches, but he feared he did. Either way, it would have to wait. It was just a matter of time for the pirates to breach the airlock. He floated into the pilot's seat, Dawes' seat, and shotgunned through undocking. Something shuddered, and he heard the deep wail of metal bending and breaking. He was licensed to fly, but as a backup for Daw, he rarely did, and probably forgot something. The checklists didn't cover fleeing from pirates anyway. Regardless, Gopher 7 didn't report any critical errors. Good enough. He lit up the thrusters and put some distance between himself and the Coleridge. But where would he go? He could outrun the Coleridge, and he had a head start on the other Gophers. But Issen's ship was a real starship, not a glorified cargo truck. He decided to dive into the canner belt itself, banking on Issen's pilot not being familiar with flying through rocks, banking on being familiar enough himself. Then an alarm trilled and his console flashed red. It was the friendly fire warning, in case the Coleridge ever accidentally aimed its point defense cannons at one of the Gophers. Only this time, it wasn't accidental. "Shit," Zen said. The whole ship rocked as the slugs tore through it, and he was knocked out when he hit his head. Zen's first thoughts were about making sure Daw was fine. Concussions were serious, and this wasn't just professional diligence. Daw was his friend. It took him a while to extricate himself from his seat, and by then he remembered that Daw wasn't there, that he saw Daw get murdered. Zen ran his hands over his face. "Shit," he whispered. Daw was dead. He felt cold inside, and he didn't really know why. This line of work claimed people all the time. A ship like the Coleridge might have upwards of 10 fatalities a year. But losing Daw was different. They'd been running this drive for nearly 11 years. They had a retirement plan. They'd leave this crap hole of a system, find a planet to live on. And now, poof, just like Cassie, they got careless, and the whole thing got flattened. And if the pirates were on the Coleridge and comms were down, the rest of the crew were probably dead too. Zen wondered if he really was the only one still alive. When he checked his right side, it was sticky with clotted blood. Stiff, sore, but he hadn't bled out. Lucky day. His hands hurt. His everything hurt. With trembling fingers, he tapped Gopher 7's cracked interface, trying to get an idea of what happened, of how much trouble he was in. He wasn't dead yet, and if there was a chance of making it out, he damn well was going to take it. Find a way to mourn the others properly. And maybe, just maybe, a spark of anger warmed his heart. Parts of the ship reported no atmosphere, so the hull was breached. The engine was gone, shredded by the cannons. The cargo rail was missing. He figured their asteroid haul had given him enough cover to avoid getting slagged entirely. Small mercy. He was stranded, but maybe he could do something unconventional with the maneuvering pylons, if any survived. And his radio still worked. That was good. But he was also deep in the Canner Belt, so it was unlikely anyone would be able to hear him. Floating through the belt and out the other side was about his only option. A couple weeks, if he was lucky and didn't collide with a rock. Then he could signal for help, and maybe in another couple of weeks, someone would pick him up. If he stretched his supplies, he had the food to survive that long. But the cannons had also clipped Gopher 7's water tanks, so all he had left was what was already in the pipes, maybe a day's worth. Zen sat back in his chair, groaned, and stared out at the Canor Belt all around him. An ocean of frozen water, as poisonous as the seas of old Earth if not purified. Not something Gopher 7 was equipped for, not something Zen was schooled in. Zen chuckled. We'll figure it out, or die trying. The Cursed Town. Content warning. Murder, suicide. He walked up through the dusty road which led to the small town of Tamans. It was twilight, and a light wind was blowing. Far away, the crop plantations acquired a greenish-orange color due to the light of the sun. On the other side, one could catch a faint glimpse of the Tiemens Church, with its tall steeple standing majestically high up in the sky. The yellow-orange hue of the sky washed the town, and the muddy red road was illuminated with a touch of gradient yellow. The whole town looked peaceful, and surprisingly, nobody was outside their houses. He entered the town and looked at the banyan tree in front of him. It had remained much the same. He looked up at the houses and walked towards them. Darkness was falling now. The red-orange hue was slowly swept away, and a dark blue color entered, only with a touch of crimson at its bottom. Shadows fell here and there, creating a spooky atmosphere, and he quickened his pace, as if to avoid the evil spell cast by the shadows of the houses. The moon came up, not too bright, for clouds were starting to surround it from all sides. He glanced upwards and realized that he had to take shelter somewhere. Rainfall could occur any time now. He walked through the dusty and muddy road and looked here around for inns, but there were none. Finally, he found a big apartment, which was deserted. He let out a sigh of relief and walked up the stairs and entered the apartment. It was evident that the apartment was still under construction work. It was not completed. However, years of neglect had withered away the raw smell of the brick walls, and small plants could be seen. growing almost everywhere. All of them had a feeling of evil in them. The brick walls, the plants, the floors, and even the ceiling. It was like they had witnessed a lot of sad events and were telling him not to go further inside the house. The house itself was spooky, with its large corridors and almost no rooms. A huge, round staircase led to the other floors. The grayish appearance of the apartment matched perfectly with his gray and withered t-shirt and pants. He went up the staircase and reached the terrace. It was broad and wide, and one could see the beautiful town stretched before it. He looked down and was surprised to see an old woman with a lantern standing in the doorway of the apartment, waving her hands to call him. He descended the staircase and ran out of the apartment to meet the old woman. The woman was short in stature and had gray hair, with sometimes a tint of black in them. Her face was wrinkled, and she looked at him through her cat-green eyes, piercingly. "What are you doing here?" she asked coldly. "I am a visitor, and I came here for certain business matters. I could not find any inn to spend the night in, so I came here," he said. She looked at him suspiciously, and then said, "Okay, you better come with me. This place is not good, especially at night." He nodded his head and followed the old woman. He was cold with fear and could not understand what was happening. He followed her till they reached a cottage, and the old woman asked him to enter. He went inside and enjoyed the warmth of the fire which was lit. He sat down on a sofa, and the woman came to her with a candle. She placed the candle on the table and handed him a plate. "You must be hungry. Here, have some food. You better not go to the apartment anymore." "Why?" he asked. "It's a long story. I have seen too much of this world to remember happy deeds. Most are evil." "What do you actually mean? Do you want to hear?" "Yes, I do." She took a long, deep breath and then began. "Long ago, when I was about 17 years of age, there used to live a plantation owner named Hamilton. He had a lot of money and was very rich. You see those plantations? All those were Sir Hamilton's. He was not only rich, but kind and generous too. He used to donate with open hands. He had a beautiful wife, 4 daughters, and 1 son. However, naturally, his neighbors were very jealous of him and despised him. He did not care that much for that. But one day, his neighbors attacked his family. His daughters were of almost my age then, and the son was only a baby. They killed his daughters and his wife, but somehow Hamilton and his son were able to escape. Why did not Hamilton inform the police? He asked. There was no evidence against the neighbors. He had nothing to do. I later heard that he had fled somewhere to Canada. But how does it relate to the apartment? The old woman sighed. Her green eyes glistened, and she said, the apartment was being made by Hamilton. He wanted to turn it into a hospital. Yes, but how does that matter anyway? Rain had started falling heavily, and the fire and candle went out. The two people were left in total darkness. However, he could still see the old woman's eyes glistening. The old woman said, "For the past few years, there had been a lot of suicides there. Many girls of around 16, 17 years are committing suicide there. It all started with the daughter of Mrs. Morpen. She jumped from the terrace you were standing a few minutes ago. The second case was of Mrs. Rayon's daughter. She was found hanging from the chandelier one morning, her face white and terror-stricken. He was taken aback and looked at the old woman with wide and fearful eyes. Lightning struck, illuminating the whole room for a moment, and he could see the old woman's face, ugly, wrinkled with a strong, piercing glance, which was almost witch-like. He wanted to run out of the house, but some strange power kept him rooted to his seat. The old woman said, "You better go to sleep now. I guess you had a very tiresome day." The old woman showed him his bedroom, and he fell down on his bed, immediately asleep. The next morning, when he woke up, he could see the sun shining brilliantly outside. He heaved himself up and went to the living room. The old woman was preparing coffee. She handed him a cup, and he sat down on the sofa. He drank from the cup the delicious, thick cappuccino and felt refreshed. He almost forgot all the horrible incidents from yesterday night. "Where do you want to go today? I can show you the way. It is evident that you are new to this place, as you were talking about inns in here. I have heard about Kingsman's Place here. Can you please take me there?" "Kingsman's Place? Okay, I will. It is a business center here. When do you want to go?" "About 9:30. What do you say? Please prepare a packed lunch for me." "Of course. Get ready then." He went back to his bedroom and took out his suitcase. He looked at himself in the mirror. He was middle-aged, but still, he looked pretty young. He brought out a coat, shirt, and pant, and put it on. He looked the perfect businessman. After having breakfast, the two went out. On the way, they came across the Flint River. There he saw some girls whispering and talking together. One of them was extremely beautiful. Her fair skin with an orange tint made one remember pure milk. Her eyes were a deep blue, and she had beautiful black eyelashes. Her cheeks were pink, and her lips were a light red. Her mass of curls was thrown at her back, and she wore a pretty green dress. Her hands were well toned, and her legs were slender and well-shaped. She looked a pretty picture. He stared at her for some time, and then she turned to the old woman, and pointing to the girl, he asked, "Who is that girl?" The old woman glanced at the girl and then said, "She is Mr. Trudeau's daughter." "Pretty, isn't she?" "Yes," he said. "What is her age?" "About 17. He sighed and gestured at the old woman to move forward. They reached Kingsman S. Place, and the old woman left him there with his lunchbox. He did not wait there. As soon as the old woman was out of sight, he started running. He did not stop until he reached the old building. He entered and went up to the terrace. The terrace was absolutely empty. Despite being so large, the parapets were very low, and there were high risks of falling to death in case of an accidental slip. Unlike the rest of the house, almost no plants were there on the terrace due to some unknown reason. He roamed here and there on the terrace. He stepped very carefully, and whenever he looked down, he was sick at the sight of houses so far down below. He hated heights and was afraid of them. He went downstairs and waited. "You know, Laura, I will go to Grandma Fontaine's house today." The words kept ringing in his mind. To reach Grandma Fontaine's house, she had to cross this building. There she was coming, alone. Nobody was with her. He waited silently, and as soon as she came in front of the apartment, he gripped her hand and pulled her inside. Before she could scream, he put a handkerchief under her nose, and smelling the chloroform, she fell unconscious. He now prepared for it. He dragged her upstairs to the terrace and carefully washed her face. He then threw her down the parapet, and she landed with a loud thud sound. Dead. Yes, she was dead. Blood was flowing from her, and her pretty face was peaceful. He quickly fled from the place before anybody could see him. He did not return to the old woman's house. He kept walking towards the outskirts of the town. It would take him almost 3 hours to get out. He had seen his own sisters and mother get killed in front of him. Those Morpins, Rayons, Trudeaus, and Greys have killed them out of jealousy. He and his father had somehow fled. But after some time, his father also died. He died saying, "Kill Morpin, kill Trudeau, kill Rayon, kill Grey. Don't let them live." He had done that. He had killed all of them, except Grey's daughter. He would be back for her after the next 4 years. Yes, he would not let her live. They do not deserve to live. They had destroyed his life. He would destroy theirs. He would not let them be happy when his own happiness had been snatched away from him. Never. He looked back at the town. It was twilight yet again. The town looked peaceful, but he could hear faint sounds of crying. Let them cry. They will have to cry again after 4 years. He turned and walked away from the town as darkness fell and made the town silent. The disappearance of Elizabeth Conway. Elizabeth Conway, reported missing on the 18th of November, 1986. 5'5", slender build, brown hair, and green eyes. Last seen leaving school premises on the 13th of November at roughly 1600, wearing her school uniform, white shirt, navy blazer, tie, and tights, a double-breasted brown overcoat with white buttons, and a black woolly hat. First missing persons report of the victim. No previous criminal record. No records of mental illnesses. No reports of family conflict. No records of conflict at school. So, no reason to run away, thought the inspector, as he meticulously read over her profile, line by line, taking a long drag of his cigarette in between. No suspects, no trails, and no trace of the missing girl. The only lead, a Nikon F3 SLR, with a large crack streaking across its lens. There was nothing special about the camera itself. In any ordinary case, one would suspect nothing of a broken camera under a shedding oak tree hidden in a pile of leaves. They'd tut and shake their head at the thought of an inconsiderate litterer leaving a trail of rubbish without a speck of care for the environment. Even to the inspector, it would be meaningless litter, except it was found near the route Elizabeth would take to get home from school. Through the entrance nearest to the duck pond, to feed them the crusts from her sandwiches she refused to eat. Past the fields of goalposts where the local Sunday league teams would train. Through the heavily wooded area where the owls and squirrels nested before reaching the exit next that led to the local pub, where she would find her house on the end of the road. Yet even passing places that would often be swarming with people, witnesses, the girl seemed to have vanished without a trace. Perhaps it was his intuition and expertise that made him question the worth of the camera. Or perhaps it was his desperation to solve the case without a single suspect or lead that made him hold on to a false sense of hope. Whichever it was, he allowed himself the hint of a smile at the result of trusting his judgment as he swept his eye across the photos that hung across the dark room. The photos of the girl who had disappeared without a trace. The constable stood in disbelief at the first lead in the impossible case. Had it not been for the countless nights of sleep he lost in desperate search of a clue. And now he held on to the clue in his hands as he would his own child. It was heavy. It came with a neck strap, noticeable if she had dropped it. Clearly, it was discarded on purpose. What could the girl have seen that made her throw away such an exquisite bit of kit? He wondered. One by one, the two closely analyzed each scene from the roll of 400 films, searching for the pieces of the puzzle that was hidden within. Seems like we may have our first few suspects. The constable held the print under a blood crimson tint that dimmed across the dark room. He streaked his hands over the two girls, one who seemed tanned recently from the Mediterranean with bright blonde hair, throwing a frisbee to the other with silky black hair, who seemed to fix a jealous gaze towards a boy that lay next to Elizabeth on a picnic blanket, her head grazing his wavy brown hair. The photo had been taken in the same park Elizabeth passed through on the way to school. The inspector's hunch was correct. There had to be a clue within the photos, as few as there may have been on the roll. These three seem to appear in a lot of these photos, especially this lad here. Suspects, maybe. The inspector spoke with a tone of sarcasm. Or perhaps constable, a concept you may not be familiar with. They are her friends? The constable growled in disapproval, unable to reply with a witty comeback, as he continued to shake his head at the photos. I don't know, Inspector. There's just something quite off about these photos, as if something isn't right in these pictures. Though he rolled his eyes at the constable's intuition, or rather, his lack of, he could not help but agree as he continued to analyze the other photos. Some, like the one the inspector had pointed out, were of her in the park, the location they suspected of her last whereabouts. The photo at the end of the wash line caught his eye more than the others. The photo of the girl walking away into the wooded area. He could not explain the cold shiver that flooded his body. Perhaps it was the faded glow around her, casting an ominous shadow in the dark winter night. Perhaps it was the way she seemed to be descending into an abyss of darkness, never to be seen again. Some by the school, seemingly at the start of the day, judging by the children heading towards the building. Some by the front of her house, and a few in various random locations, such as cafes, restaurants, and cinemas. There seemed to be no pattern in the location, other than the fact Elizabeth didn't seem to travel very much, or very far, if these places she deemed worthy of photographing. Or perhaps, the inspector thought, there was a significance to these seemingly mundane locations. Either way, all these locations had previously been searched, revealing no trace of the girl. He noted the appearances of each new face he came across, analyzing body language between characters and secrets hidden behind each expression. He scanned each person in depth, as if he were questioning them in an interrogation. He knew, of course, that the basis of such assumptions would be no different to creating characters for a storybook. The balance of assumption and deduction was a fine line. Perhaps, he thought, there would be someone lurking within these photos, hidden away in the background. Someone with a vengeful eye, waiting to kidnap poor unsuspecting Elizabeth. But he dared not suggest it to the constable, at least not yet. To suspect such a thing would escalate the case to a criminal investigation. From his experience, escalating a missing persons case turned out to have severe consequences for the person who was eventually found, dead or alive. He was somewhat relieved to find no such person lurking in the background. He took a step back and sharply exhaled a cloud of smoke in relief. He tilted his head and gathered his remarks, taking another drag of his cigarette. So far, only two things seemed to correlate with the photos. One being nothing more than a hunch. He could not quite place it, but there was something familiar about many of the views in the photos. Holding a photo in one hand and taking a hit of his cigarette in another. What was this sense of familiarity he felt? It was as if he had stood exactly where the photographer had. "It's strange," mumbled the constable. "Look at it in a certain way, and you could follow the girl's daily routine. Leave home, go to school, walk home through the park, hang out with friends. Seems like she goes through life in a hurry, judging by the blurriness of them all." The inspector grinned at the constable's remark. The quality of photography that went into the pictures was quite rushed and poorly taken. Aside from Elizabeth, the others in the pictures seemed distorted or blurry. Either the girl's skills were in dire need of improvement, or she was too consumed by her own vanity to focus on anything else in the photos, given that she was in every single photo. The latter was more likely, except she didn't seem to face the camera in any of the shots. His eyes fixed once again on the girl on her own, walking into the wooded area. "Tell me something," said the inspector, circling his head across the room. "What kind of photos would you take on your camera?" The constable raised an eyebrow, puzzled by the inspector's attempt at small talk. "Nice scenery, friends, family, pets, events, perhaps any special occasions I'd like to remember precisely. So my question is, out of a roll of 400 photos, given the cost of rolls and prints these days, why only take photos of yourself? And why such blurry ones?" The hum of electricity flowed through the dark room lights, as if the room, too, was anticipating the constable's answer. Could it be, he thought aloud, that the camera may not actually belong to Elizabeth? "I fear so, Constable. Now ask yourself this. The photos are blurry and poorly lit, possibly due to the zoom distorting the camera's focus, and due to the lack of flash used. So why are the photos so poorly captured? And why does everyone in the photos seem to be doing quite mundane activities?" The colors in the constable's face had suddenly bled dry as he deciphered the inspector's epiphany. "You mean to tell me you see it too now, don't you?" the inspected continued, masking the sense of dread he refused to succumb to. "It's not the people in the photos we're after, but the photographer himself." The inspector took the last drag of his cigarette, as if to signal the constable to brace himself for the impact of his next words. "A stalker." He closely narrowed his gaze at the photo at the end of the wash line, memorizing each of the minute details. These are the photos taken by Elizabeth's stalker. It all adds up. They were taken from a distance by someone who did not want to be noticed. Except... The inspector's voice came to a ghostly whisper. Except when his eyes shifted focus away from the missing girl and onto her shadow, as a look of terror took place of the once coy smile, as if he were watching it unfold on a theater screen. He pictured the girl stopping dead in her tracks as the accidental camera flash illuminated the bushes around her, which were once enveloped by the winter darkness. He pictured the girl gingerly turning her head towards, praying it was only a trick of the light, staring wide-eyed in horror at the silhouette next to the tree. He pictured the man livid at his mistake as he tossed the camera, the evidence, as his expression changed to the smolder of a predator in the wild who had been spotted by his prey. As he pounced forward to begin the desperate chase, the inspector pictured the horror in the girl's face, living out the fear of every woman alone and vulnerable in the dark, fluidly sprinting away from the danger, lungs too strained to scream for help. He pictured the girl pounding her legs on the path, desperate to gain distance, only to be tackled down onto the damp, frosty grass. He pictured her writhing and clawing out to escape the clutches of her attacker, only to be dragged into the pitch-black abyss of the winter evening. The constable darted towards the door, coming to a sudden halt by the inspector's sharp grasp. "Let go!" he demanded. "This is out of your jurisdiction now. This is now an abduction case." But the inspector only strengthened his grip on the constable, refusing to release him. "Do you even know who you are looking for? We have no suspects and no other leads. If you sound the alarm now, we may never get the girl back. That stalker would know we were after him, and who knows what he'd do to the girl. The longer we wait, the more likely we are to lose the girl. It's already been almost a week. If we wait any longer, as you said, who knows what this guy could do? We'll find him. We're so close. It's all in there," the inspector exclaimed, pointing to the photos. "The clues are all in there. I just know it. Somewhere in this puzzle of photos is our suspect." The constable barged the inspector to release himself from his grip. He flicked the light switch on as he began to storm out the door. His hand slammed the handle of the door as he came to a sudden stop. He held his breath and paused. He looked back at the photos hanging from the wash line. Slowly, he approached the image of the school hanging in the middle of the room. The inspector curiously watched the constable, who had his eyes transfixed on the photo he held. One by one, the constable took the photos off the wash lines and began to arrange them in order. The inspector was all but helpless to wonder what was running through the constable's mind. But he dared not utter a word as the constable ordered the photos row by row. The constable's mind raced with thoughts, frantically searching for the thing that would connect the pieces to solve this mystery. Searching for a connection that may not even exist. But he had to try, his hands shuffling, sliding and shifting through the mounts and mounts of images. Finally, the constable took a few steps back at the puzzle he had solved, each photo laid in what appeared to be an order of brightness. They're taken through a specific route, he began. Take a look at the lighting, the shadows, and the location. The inspector, at a loss from his amazement, traced his eyes along the wash line. He watched the girl emerge from her house at first light, then wander into the school as more daylight emerged. He watched her have lunch with her friends by the cafe near the schools and walk home in the rapidly dimming light of the winter evening. It was all there in the lighting. Based on the path the photographer seems to have taken, I'd say the photos are taken in the same order as some sort of delivery route. The inspector could not help but crack a smile at the constable's genius breakthrough. It was all laid out perfectly. The route seemed to begin somewhere on Elizabeth's Road, where her house was, then to her school, taking other routes near the cafes and shopping center, finally ending at the park, where he'd presumably end his shift and watch the girl on her way home. The question is, who exactly would use a route like this? The inspector wondered. Solve the last piece of the puzzle, and we'll have our suspect. The milkman, perhaps? Unlikely, the constable answered. The milkman would be doing his route before anyone was up. A postman? Perhaps. But what would a postman be doing in a park? Surely someone would notice him hiding behind bushes and trees. An ice cream man could hide from his van. Never heard of anyone selling ice cream before school? Paperboy, again, what would he be doing in a park? The inspector dropped his head and clenched his fists in frustration. They were so close to finding their suspect. Both he and the inspector knew they had one chance at finding the suspect before the investigation became public, and before the abductor knew the police were after him. Before it would be too late for the girl. If it wasn't already, he lifted his arm to his mouth to take another drag of his cigarette. He growled in frustration as he realized he had already finished it. He needed another one badly. He needed to focus. He reached into his coat pocket and balanced the nib between his lips. The sweet cherry scent of the Marlboro had immediately begun to work its magic, even before lighting it. He took his lighter from his back pocket, but stopped dead as the flints sparked. His gaze focused on the photos once again. He knew there was something familiar about the views in the photos. He had stood exactly where the photographer had been standing. He had stood in front of the laundrette that stood opposite the cafe, stood by the bus stop near the school, and stood by the same tree in the park, all while taking the last few drags of his cigarettas before throwing the butt into the bin. "It's the bin man," he exclaimed. "Drives around the houses and schools, then goes to the park to pick up the litter." "Of course," exclaimed the constable. "No one would suspect him hiding behind trees and bushes. Anyone would think he was only raking leaves or picking up litter. Anyone would think he was only doing his job." The inspector and constable nodded in unison. Both ran for their coats, darting out the door. They had their suspect, but there was no telling what he could have done to the girl. Both raced to the car and blared the siren, knowing it may have been too late to save the girl from the clutches of her stalker. Praying the worst had not yet succumbed to her.